name is Mike Kane. We've been involved with trying to save the GM's electric car, the EV1. GM built about 1,100 of them. They leased them on 3-year leases, put about 800 on the road under 3-year leases. And at the end of the 3-year leases, they've taken them off the road and have been running them out to Arizona and crushing them. The cars were perfectly usable. Most of them had 30,000 miles on them. They went well over 100 miles on a charge, 0 to 60 in a little over 7 seconds. It was a very popular car here in LA when it was available. The cars have been removed. The last one went yesterday. We had a 24-hour vigil in front of the facility. Ran 28 days. The cars are now in Arizona, and we expect within a week or so they'll all be destroyed.
Tuesday morning they sent 3 trucks and picked up about 21 cars. 2 people were arrested trying to stop it. Civil disobedience, very peaceful, but arrested nonetheless. We followed the trucks to Arizona, having been detained by the Arizona State Patrol for stalking the truck drivers, no less, because I know I'm very threatening looking. Drove to Mesa, where they dropped off the cars, and the Desert Proving Center where they crushed them. Drove back just in time to have 9 more trucks show up yesterday and take the rest of the cars away. We tried in every way to get GM to even communicate with us on this. We wrote letters, we made phone calls, we asked them to come speak to us, and they did send a response. That response just took the form of 15 large trucks, probably all told. So it was kind of interesting yesterday to watch them act that much out of fear. An EV1 motor had 1 moving part, so it was a much simpler car. It didn't need oil changes in spark plugs or gas or petroleum products. It doesn't make them the 40% in maintenance and repairs that cars usually make for automotive companies. So it's a threat on a number of levels in that way. GM kept making us promises of, if there's demand, we'll build you guys more cars to sell. And so we started that waiting list. We got 5,000 people on that waiting list just in the limited markets of California and Arizona. So there absolutely was demand. There is demand now. Dave Barsmith knows it. He and I have talked, but he has to give the company line, and the company line is that there is no demand. I got to drive one every day for about 6 years. I worked on the EV1 project. I put most of those cars on the road, and I tried to lease an EV1. I was on my own waiting list for 2 years, and I never got to lease one myself.
So you worked for General Motors in the EV1 program,
Yep.
and they would not lease you an EV1.
Correct. I married an EV1 technician. I gave birth to the EV1 mascot, who sat out here with sidewalk chalk and wrote messages on the sidewalk asking them not to crush the EV1. And then I got to go home and explain to him how they took all the cars away, and he won't get to have his little red one after all.
I had 2. I had the Gen 1 in 1997 and the Gen 2 in 1999. And people think that General Motors is one organization, a monolithic organization, but it's not. It's composed of maybe 150 warring tribes that are battling each other all the time for supremacy. They fight amongst each other over issues, over cars, over programs, and they play fair and they play foul. The EV1 was sort of created in secret by Hughes guys. Essentially, in the tribal analogy, the Big Iron tribe descended upon the EV1 tribe, chopped off all their heads, which they fired them all except one guy, and tore down the village, burned the ground, salted it, put a curse on it for 10 generations, and that's the end of the program. Whatever they spent on the program, we could argue that program is gone. And now the cars are here, and they've got a standing offer on the table, at least $25,000 per car. Cash, no rebates, no warranties, no responsibilities. We'll sign away that they don't have to supply parts. And to think that they shredded 1,000 of them. It costs them money to do that. And they could have made a profit. There's clearly a business proposals right now to fix the situation. They could easily recover the company, but the path they're on now is madness. One of the EV1 specialists right here, one of the GM managers just told her today, said, "Gee, with your passion, I wish you were working for me." And she said, "Well, I was working for you, but if you do something that I'd like, I'd love to work for you again." But she was one of the heads that rolled when they fired all the EV1 people. The technology is no secret. There's versions of it that are made by the same people that invented the EV1 AC propulsion, Alan Cocconi. He actually has made successor motors that actually are slightly more efficient. The thing is built into a Volkswagen Golf. This is the motor controller. This is the entire electric car right here. It's 150 kilowatts, about 200 horsepower. So the thing goes like a bat out of the other place. It's got a lot of power. But this is it. You buy this thing here, you attach it to the transaxle, you have an electric car. Like an EV1, you always see the other people in the rear view mirror. Their acceleration is smooth because it's direct drive. There's no gearing, no clutch, no transmission. And now you feel the regenerative braking sucking the power of motion of energy back in. But the main thing about these cars is not that they're that fast, which they are, but that they're fun to drive, and that if you don't ever have to go to a gas station. Not having to go to a gas station or have an oil change or a smog check is a nice thing. Another reason that they are opposed to electric cars, of course, is that it's change, and any kind of a change requires adjustment. The Bush administration is highly involved in the oil industry. Bush's advisor, Andrew Card, was formerly General Motors' chief lobbyist against electric cars. And Condoleezza Rice is the only Secretary of State that I know about that has a Chevron tanker named after her. How do you compete with General Motors? They have time and motion engineers that have, honed the art of making a car down to a science. They can cut costs down to the bone. They've been doing this for 100 years. And, the EV1, every one of them was like this. And they're junked them.
Yeah.
Every one of them was as fun to drive. You drive it to work every day and you were happy to get on the freeway. And that's why all those people were out here, because it was a great car, and to think that they destroyed all those is just tragic.
This is Electra. She's my pride and joy. My name is Linda Nichols. I'm president of Earth Resource Foundation. Now, the sad story about Electra is her life's in danger because she's fleet leased, and Toyota takes all their fleet leases back and crushes them. And they're supposed to be green, but they're not going to get their hands on Electra. I wanted to get an EV1, they weren't available. They were taking it back and crushing them. It's a challenge to vested interests. It's a challenge to the old Stone Age energy policy. It's a challenge to oil interests. I don't have smog checks, oil changes, tune-ups. Southern California has leased hundreds of these, and they say that they have cars that have gone between 120,000 and 150,000 miles with no discernible battery degradation. So that right there tells you how sturdy, how dependable, how simple, and what a fabulous technology that works now that is a bit of a threat to the powers that be. So I have a solar photovoltaic system, solar panels on my roof. So when I plug this car in, I really am running on sunshine for all intents and purposes. But if we could lasso for 1 minute all the solar energy that comes down to our Earth, it's enough energy to power our world for a year if only we knew how to lasso it. I love the way it powers my life and sends my car down the freeway at 80 miles an hour. And I don't intend to give it up. My family, however, is into extractive industries. My dad who's an old oil guy, loves to go and watch my meter spin backwards. He can't believe it, and now he brags to everybody how fabulous electric cars are. He also says that oil is finite, and he says, Linda, you better hold on to this car because gas prices are going to go through the roof. They're just going to go through the roof. This is from a guy who's been in the oil industry for 60 years. So I take that warning very seriously. He can see the writing on the wall, and for many years he said oil would last forever. He doesn't believe that now.
Wow.
Every little bits you can do to help. Get up and do it. Don't just, whine about the smog. And that's what I'm doing. I know that I create smog somehow, and I want to solve it.
What happened to your EV1?
I think they crushed it already.
Drive the EV1 electric car for America. Patriots want to drive the electric car to reduce our oil dependence. General Motors, Cadillac, produced the electric car, the EV1, with our money, our taxpayer money, but they won't release the car for patriots that drive it to get off of oil dependency. Go to saveev1.org, find out what you can do to force General Motors to release the oil-free car, the EV1 electric car.
When I leased my EV1, I thought I was stepping off a cliff, and it wasn't even a curb. It was just going to be a car that I would supplement with my gasoline car. I sold my gasoline car a couple of months later. It's just amazing how well these cars work. When I heard that there were 77 cars left in Burbank, the 77 EV1s left in Burbank, I was very interested, and as it turned out, my old EV1 was one of the 77.
I come from a long line of engineers, and I really love that car. This is my one day off a week, and I choose to spend it standing on a corner in the rain. I'm pretty passionate about it.
It really is up to the large manufacturers to produce these products. Individuals can't do it. It's on much too big a scale. If the manufacturers aren't going to do it, if they're not going to get behind it and push it, it's not going to happen. They're making these Hummers, which, you know, are very expensive, very limited production. There's no reason they can't do an EV1 or any other electric vehicle.
My name's Greg Crosby, and I got involved with the EV1 through our rental car company, which is EV Rental Cars, and we were the very first environmental rental car company in the nation. We started off with 12 the GM EV1s. I was always working the front counter to try and talk people into renting the car, so by doing that I had to be excited about the car first, which it really was. From day one, I loved the look, sort of like the F-16 look. I loved the speed. I loved the fact it was so quiet. All in all, the car was fantastic, and I'm very disappointed that, unfortunately, they had to crush the cars because people were just now starting to get excited about it. There's a lot of charging sites. I live here in LA. There's a lot of charging sites here. They're all next to restaurants and hotels and such. If you're really in the environment and you really want to stick with electric, the EV1 was the only way to really go. So yeah, I'm very disappointed that it didn't work out. We didn't have any conversation at all with GM. Basically, we got a recall notice in the mail. It was all very corporate, and basically they wanted the cars back, and they wanted them back within a month. And so we had to get the cars because we had a lot of monthly rentals, because people really like the cars, so they take the cars almost as a lease car, and they take them for months at a time, sometimes 6 to a year. And they were very matter of fact. You have to have the cars been recalled. They're taking them off the market, I guess because they said the parts were too expensive, whatever. They're going to use any excuse to get the cars back. So we had a lot of disappointed customers, and we were disappointed ourselves.
I'm Wally Rappel. I was one of the key engineers involved in the development of the EV1 powertrain. I was a sophomore at Caltech back in 1965. And I remember sitting in history class one afternoon, a very smoggy afternoon. The mountains that are to my right were not visible then because of the smog. And the issue came up of the role of Caltech in dealing with a problem like air pollution. And I remember discussing that some, but then thinking, well, what about my role? I got a summer job after that year, earned money to both buy a VW microbus, the 1959 VW microbus, and also to launch off on the construction of a propulsion system, an electric propulsion system using golf cart batteries, surplus aircraft motors, and I destroyed semiconductors. I learned a lot of things the hard way, but I learned a lot, and there was a lot of interest in this, both on campus and within the media, the press. And that was very encouraging. And finally I thought, you know, the most interesting thing, if we could pull this off, would be to have a cross-country race between Caltech and MIT. And the story I heard was that the dean at MIT thought it was a really dumb idea, but he said such. And the students thought, if the dean thinks it's a dumb idea, we ought to do this. MIT got a hold of a Corvair, I think donated from General Motors. They were trying to get rid of them. And so they converted the Corvair to electric drive. And all this came together so that on August 26th, 1968, the race started. And we drove 24 hours a day in opposite directions. And it was a tremendous event for both of us. We learned a lot of practical things. I worked for then a number of years at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory between 1976 and 1990. And a great deal of what I did was in connection with electric propulsion technology. Probably the most important thing I learned was how to achieve increased performance. And so I contacted AeroVironment, a company right here in Monrovia that had demonstrated the capability of human-powered aircraft. And I realized that since they had this capability to do good aerodynamic designs, to build lightweight structures, that marrying that with some of the things I'd been doing at JPL in terms of propulsion could lead to perhaps a semi-practical electric vehicle. And so I worked with AeroVironment in 1985 to produce a proposal called Electrospirit. This was for a small electric vehicle that would be fun to drive. And this proposal was submitted to General Motors, and we failed. So in 1985 it seemed like electric vehicles were not doing too well, at least to me. And I continued doing the research that I was doing at JPL until 1987, when a strange series of events, an amazing series of events happened. The events really started in Australia with a naturalist by the name of Hans Tolstrup, who wanted to have a solar race in that country, and the rules appeared on the desk of a vice president at Hughes Corporation. Now, Hughes had been just recently acquired by GM, so it was a division of General Motors. And this vice president, Howard Wilson, felt that it would be very wise if this would take place as an event where GM and Hughes worked together to build this solar-powered vehicle, and of course that they'd win the race. AeroVironment was contacted by Howard Wilson, and after discussing it internally, AeroVironment decided that they wanted to do this. So they now worked with General Motors to build what became known as the Sunracer. So based on that, we then went ahead with the Sunracer design, which was a very beautiful looking vehicle by comparison, where the array was all contoured. And it turned out to be a great success. The Sunracer won the race by a landslide. We beat the second place vehicle by a day and a half. And it turned out the second place vehicle was Ford Motor Company. So that was a good thing, and it put us in a good relationship with General Motors. We, out of the blue, sent this proposal to them, and it was funded. It was several $1 million to develop what became known as the Impact, and then later they took that over and parlayed that into the EV1. So that's really gives you some of the events that had to stack together to enable the EV1 to come about. Some of what we did was a bit awkward, but it was awkward because this was also new, and it worked. We were able to demonstrate the vehicle. Roger Smith, chairman of the board, was excited about it. He drove the vehicle to Washington, D.C. and demonstrated it to the people there at Earth Day, and made the statement that General Motors would put the vehicle in production. And he made that statement, I believe, without any clearance from the board. And so GM was committed, and then events started to spin out of control, at least from GM's perspective, because the California Air Resource Board then drafted the first version of the ZEV mandate. GM first went along with that, but they then felt trapped by the mandate, and in recent years, of course, they lobbied and succeeded in having the mandate withdrawn. Part of the trick that they used to get rid of the mandate was to offer seemingly something as a trade, which was the fuel cell development. And the fuel cell development doesn't make sense in terms of energy, because the amount of primary energy used is several times that of what you use with an electric vehicle. So it just was a step backwards from where they had been. Toyota, who's probably the furthest ahead of anyone right now, has made the statement on a couple of occasions that fuel cell vehicles are at least 25 years off in the future. GM has said no, they'll have stuff in 2010, now just 5 years away, and the credibility, I feel, of that is zero. Knowing where they are technically, the EV1 was ready, and a lot of people liked it. There was a long waiting list that was not disclosed really in the press, and GM really didn't advertise the vehicle. If they would have advertised, they would have done even better. But then you have the big thing, is that in these recent years there's been some tremendous breakthroughs technologically. The lithium-ion battery, the nickel metal hydrides have improved dramatically. The advances in power electronics, all of these things have combined so that what we see now as a potential for electric vehicles is far beyond the EV1. And GM should have that vision that this is a moving target, that this is the future, and instead they've been fighting against it. crushing the future. Not only can we triple the range with half the battery weight, we can also produce truly sports car type performance. We can do 0 to 60 in 4 seconds easily with the battery technology we have now, and performance sells. And that's something I feel the car companies should go after, because now you can have your cake and eat it too. Of course, as we talk about how the EV1 got into production and went out, there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that I'm not privy to, and I wish I were. One of the people on the board of directors at General Motors was Tom Everhart, who was then the president of Caltech, and he supported this very strongly and held out that this was very important for GM's future. Since then, of course, Tom Everhart left the board of directors. When Jack Smith took over after Roger Smith, there was a real desire to make the company profitable. They had been losing money, and Jack used the approach of just getting rid of anything that wasn't making money then or likely going to make money in the next 6 months. And I can understand that, but that's the part of the mentality that led to the elimination of the EV1. It seems that what happened is that Toyota learned the lesson and gained the vision, and that GM, who started this, lost the vision. There's the symbolism. These are electric vehicles, and at a time when electric vehicles really are needed, General Motors has made the statement, quote, "We will never do that again." And it's kind of a hardening of the heart attitude we feel, that they're on a collision course with destruction, their own destruction as well as the destruction of America. They did not like the ZEV mandate. They felt that their feet were being held to the fire by California, and they don't want anybody telling them what products they can make or can't make. And I can understand some of this from the free market mentality and even respect it. But there's a case where it goes beyond what's reasonable, and that's where deception is involved, and I believe deception has been used. I had wanted to lease an EV1, and when I contacted a Saturn dealership, they told me there was a waiting list, and when I talked to them, I said, look, the press is saying people don't want these cars, and you're telling me that there's a waiting list. There's something wrong here. I said, you know, you've got a story. This is a man bites dog story. You know, usually people are saying, I don't want the vehicle is bad. Here the people are saying, I want this vehicle, and the dealer is saying, no, you can't have it. I said, this is a news story. The person I was talking to said, yeah, as a matter of fact it is, but I've been told if I go to the press with this story, I'll be fired. So we have pressures being put on. We've seen this happen before in technologies, many times before. The best typewriter companies did not automatically become the best computer companies. And I think subconsciously they knew they were not good at doing new things. So they opposed very strongly the ZEV mandate, and they needed to get rid of electric vehicles. They had help from all the other car companies in doing this. They all said the same thing. People didn't want these vehicles. And in a sense, they were all involved with deception. They did not tell the public that there was a waiting list for these vehicles. They pretended that nobody wanted them, that nobody wanted to plug cars in, that plugging in was evil and bad. You listen to the Toyota commercial that says you never have to plug it in. The implication that's good, that if you had to plug it in, it would be very bad. Let me just ask you to think about this. If you have a cell phone or a camcorder or some other appliance, suppose instead of plugging in to charge the battery, all you had to do was go a couple of miles down the road to the gas station and get some gas. Would you rather do that? I don't think so. And the thing that is exciting to realize is that if you have a car and you park it in a garage, you'll only spend a couple of seconds a day plugging and unplugging the car. I spoke with a person at the Los Angeles Times, and I asked him, I said, you know, here's some interesting stories dealing with things that are very important, dealing with global warming, electric vehicles, our future. A major story on this would be good for the newspaper. It would be good for the readers. And this reporter said to me, he said, you don't understand the whole equation, Wally. He said, 30% of our advertising comes from the car companies, dollar-wise. And he said, it would not be to our advantage to write something that the car companies don't want us to write. So I said to him, I said, in other words, you can't write what you want to, because of advertisers. He said, that's right. And he said, if you thought it was ever different, you just didn't understand how it worked. A lot of people are predicting that somewhere between 2003 and 2010, world oil production will reach a peak. And we come very quickly to a situation where we expect rising prices of oil. And of course, we're seeing that. The message here is an economic one. This may be nice for oil companies, but it's bad for everyone else. When the administration says that we've got to balance environment with economics, I don't think it quite works that way. I think everybody's on the same side of the fence except the car companies and the oil companies. If we solve our energy problem, if we have alternatives for oil, this will benefit everyone. There are wise people and foolish people, and the wise people are developing the alternatives to hydrocarbons. And we're seeing this in Europe to some extent with their wind power. We're seeing this with Japan with things like their hybrid vehicles. And it seems like America is the odd man out in the industrial world. We are fighting against Kyoto. We're arguing that these things are not real. We're not dealing, even in many cases, with science. We're dealing with people's wishful thinking. And that's not going to be good for us economically. It's not going to be good environmentally. And we're going to lose respect among our neighbors in the world if we continue doing this.
I'm Eric Lenhart, and I'm the director of the Vehicle Research Institute here at Western Washington University. The Institute was founded more than 30 years ago by Dr. Michael Seal, who has since retired. And we've built over 40 vehicles, 40 different types of vehicles, to demonstrate the power of greater efficiency, greater safety features in vehicles. And we've had a number of innovative ideas in engine design as well, in addition to the overall vehicle design. Originally, General Motors offered 40 EV1s to different organizations, and because of our connection from the dean of the Huxley College with General Motors and with their environmental staff, we were able to obtain one additional EV1. So this is the 41st EV1 to be given to all these different organizations. They stopped the program ultimately, and we learned that they were going to be crushing the vehicles. So we were fortunate enough to get one. Unfortunately, when they gave us the vehicle, it was in pristine shape, very clean. All the panels had been buffed and prepped and repaired, in fact, but the power electronics had been partially disabled and removed. So with our technology here, it's not possible for us to return this vehicle to a normal running order. We'll have to probably rip out all of the electronic components and start over with our own hardware to produce a hybrid vehicle. So as a result, this is a much more expensive process for us, and we haven't been able to convert it to a hybrid vehicle as such. The motor seems to be intact, however, without the controller, the motor is not really a very useful piece of equipment. So we had this panel off here, but we're missing some of the power electronics that reside over here. They've told us that they wouldn't be able to provide those. They purposefully removed those so that the vehicle would be inoperable. We've actually been asked not to return this to running use, but at the same time, we had to provide a proposal that we would turn it into a hybrid vehicle to be able to obtain the vehicle. Developing a controller would be a large expenditure of resources and time, so probably not something we're going to do if we aren't able to get some help from some engineers that have some knowledge about this system. I think a display is going to be what we'll have, and if we get some time and some funding, then we'll be able to put it back on the road. But I have a few other cars to fix. We're up to Viking 40 now, which we're building, the new type of carbon fiber composite construction, and so that building those cars, the new cars, are keeping us pretty busy. Now, I think what's interesting about the EV1 is that it was the best electric car in the world, and when we look into the future, we're talking about hybrid vehicles right now, and that's certainly the direction that we've been pushing with the Vehicle Research Institute. But some people are also talking about fuel cell vehicles. There have been a lot of resources put into developing fuel cells. I personally don't feel that fuel cells are a viable option because of the challenges of the hydrogen as a fuel source. We just don't have any of it in significant quantities. What I do see, however, is that we do have electricity, and we have an electric grid that's already across the United States. So I think we'll see a point at which the hybrid vehicles will become less and less internal combustion engine powered and more electric motor powered, and that once that transition goes a certain way along, we'll see a ramping up of just using them as electric cars. And the next phase of that is going to be the plug-in hybrid. And then after that, we'll then start to see this power shift, I think. The EV1 then is going to be the first vehicle in the last part of the last century to really demonstrate what's possible. So that'll be a really interesting point in history. But I think this ultimately will come around again. We'll see electric cars as the future.